First contact and fear. The day the Zarkonians arrived was etched into humanity's collective memory like a scar. It was a crisp autumn morning in 2157 when the massive ships appeared in Earth's orbit, their sleek obsidian hulls reflecting the sun's rays in dazzling patterns. The world watched in awe and terror as the alien vessels hovered silently above major cities, their presence an undeniable declaration that humanity was no longer alone in the universe. Dr. Amelia Chen, lead xenobiologist at the Global Space Agency, stood in the bustling control room, her eyes fixed on the massive screens displaying live feeds from around the world. The tension in the air was palpable as world leaders scrambled to formulate a response to this unprecedented event. Amelia's heart raced with a mixture of fear and excitement. This was the moment she had spent her entire career preparing for, yet nothing could have truly readied her for the reality of first contact. "Dr. Chen, we're receiving a transmission from the alien ships," announced her assistant, Alex, his voice trembling slightly. Amelia nodded, steeling herself for what was to come. The room fell silent as the transmission began to play. The message was not what anyone had expected. Instead of words of peace or threats of conquest, the aliens broadcast a series of harsh, guttural sounds interspersed with clicks and hisses. The cacophony sent shivers down Amelia's spine, and she could see the fear and confusion etched on the faces of her colleagues. "It doesn't sound like any language we've ever encountered," Amelia murmured, her brow furrowed in concentration. "We need to analyze this immediately. Get me every linguist and cryptographer we have on staff." As the hours ticked by, tensions across the globe reached a fever pitch. Social media exploded with theories and panic, while governments struggled to maintain order. The Zarkonian ships remained motionless in the sky, their presence a constant reminder of humanity's newfound vulnerability. Days turned into weeks, and still no progress was made in deciphering the alien message. The Zarkonians made no further attempts at communication, nor did they show any signs of hostility. They simply watched, their ships looming over the cities like silent sentinels. It was on the 30th day after their arrival that everything changed. Without warning, smaller crafts began to descend from the motherships. Panic erupted in the streets as people fled, fearing the worst. Amelia watched from the safety of the GSA headquarters as the alien vessels touched down in city centers around the world. The creatures that emerged were unlike anything humanity had imagined. Standing over 8 feet tall, the Zarkonians were reptilian in appearance, with iridescent scales that shifted colors in the sunlight. Their eyes were large and multifaceted, like those of an insect, and they moved with an unsettling grace that belied their massive size. As world militaries mobilized, poised on a knife's edge between diplomacy and war, the Zarkonians made their intentions clear. With a series of swift, coordinated movements, they began to establish perimeters around their landing sites. Force fields shimmered into existence, cutting off large sections of each city. They're creating enclaves, Amelia realized, her voice barely above a whisper. But why? Are they trying to protect themselves from us, or? Her thoughts were interrupted by the sound of gunfire. On the screens, she watched in horror as a group of soldiers, acting against orders, opened fire on the aliens. The bullets seemed to have no effect, ricocheting off the Zarkonian scales harmlessly. In response, the aliens unleashed a devastating energy blast that vaporized the attackers instantly. The world watched in stunned silence as the Zarkonians retreated behind their force fields, leaving smoking craters and terrified populations in their wake. It was clear that any attempt at aggression would be met with overwhelming force. In the days that followed, a tense stalemate settled over the planet. The Zarkonians remained within their enclaves, occasionally venturing out to collect resources before retreating once more. Attempts at communication continued to fail, and the aliens showed no interest in human overtures of peace or diplomacy. Amelia worked tirelessly, poring over every scrap of data they had gathered on the Zarkonians. Their biology was as alien as their technology, defying conventional understanding. Yet she couldn't shake the feeling that there was something they were missing, some key to unlocking the mystery of these beings. As the weeks turned into months, society began to adapt to the new reality. The areas surrounding the Zarkonian enclaves became militarized zones, with constant surveillance and heavily armed patrols. The global economy struggled to cope with the loss of major urban centers, and a sense of hopelessness began to settle over humanity. But Amelia refused to give up. She knew that understanding was the key to coexistence, perhaps even cooperation. As she stared at the screens displaying the alien enclaves, a thought began to form in her mind. What if the problem wasn't just in the language, but in the very way humans were approaching communication? With renewed determination, Amelia set out to assemble a team of unconventional thinkers, scientists, artists, and even children. If traditional methods had failed, perhaps it was time for a radical new approach to bridging the gap between species. Little did she know that the breakthrough she sought would come from the most unexpected source, and that the fate of two species would soon rest in the hands of those least prepared to bear such a burden. As the first year of the Zarkonian presence drew to a close, humanity stood at a crossroads. The path ahead was fraught with danger and uncertainty, but also with the potential for growth and discovery beyond their wildest dreams. The true test of human resilience and ingenuity was about to begin, and the outcome would determine the future of not just Earth, but the entire galaxy. Part 2. The Accidental Ambassador. In the small town of Millbrook, just outside the perimeter of what was now known as the New York Enclave, life had taken on a surreal quality. The distant hum of the Zarkonian force field had become as commonplace as the chirping of birds, a constant reminder of the New World Order. 11-year-old Zoe Harper sat on her front porch, her legs swinging idly as she watched the shimmering barrier in the distance. Unlike the adults around her, who viewed the alien presence with fear and suspicion, Zoe was fascinated. Her room was filled with drawings of the Zarkonians, imaginative renderings based on the glimpses she caught on news broadcasts, and the stories whispered by adults when they thought children weren't listening. "Zoe, honey, come inside. It's getting late," her mother called, her voice tinged with the ever-present worry that had become the norm for parents in this new era. "Just 5 more minutes, Mom," Zoe pleaded, her eyes never leaving the horizon. There was something about the way the force field rippled in the fading sunlight that captivated her. It was beautiful, in a strange, otherworldly way. As she watched, something caught her eye. A flicker of movement just beyond the barrier. Zoe squinted, leaning forward on the porch railing. There it was again. A shape, moving with inhuman grace along the perimeter of the enclave. Without a second thought, Zoe jumped off the porch and began running towards the fence that marked the edge of the military exclusion zone. Her heart pounded with excitement and a touch of fear. This was her chance to see a real Zarkonian up close. "Zoe, stop!" Her mother's panicked cry echoed behind her. But Zoe was already squeezing through a gap in the fence, her small frame easily slipping past the barricade meant to keep adults at bay. As she approached the shimmering wall of energy, Zoe slowed her pace. The air crackled with static electricity, making the hair on her arms stand on end. And then she saw it, a Zarkonian, mere feet away on the other side of the barrier. The alien was even more magnificent than she had imagined. Its scales shimmered with iridescent hues of blue and green, shifting colors as it moved. Its insectoid eyes swiveled to focus on her, and Zoe felt a moment of paralyzing fear. But curiosity quickly overcame her trepidation. Slowly, cautiously, Zoe raised her hand in a tentative wave. "Hello," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. The Zarkonian tilted its head, studying her with an intensity that made Zoe feel like a bug under a microscope. Then, to her amazement, it raised its own hand, a 4-fingered appendage with wickedly sharp claws, and mimicked her wave. Zoe's face split into a wide grin. "Can you understand me?" she asked, taking a step closer to the barrier. The alien made a series of clicks and whistles, its scales flashing in patterns that seemed almost deliberate. Zoe frowned, concentrating hard on the sounds and colors. There was something familiar about them, something that tickled at the edge of her consciousness. Zoe Harper. The sharp voice of Colonel Reeves, head of security for the Millbrook perimeter, cut through the air. Step away from the barrier immediately. Startled, Zoe turned to see a group of soldiers approaching, weapons drawn. The spell broken. She glanced back at the Zarkonian, only to find it had retreated into the shadows of the enclave. As Zoe was escorted back to the safety of the town, news of her encounter spread like wildfire. Within hours, Dr. Amelia Chin was on a flight to Millbrook, her mind racing with the possibilities this incident presented. "You're saying the alien responded to you?" Amelia asked, leaning forward in her chair as she interviewed Zoe the next day. Zoe nodded enthusiastically. "It waved back at me. And then it made these sounds and its scales kept changing colors. It was like it was trying to talk to me." Amelia exchanged a glance with Colonel Reeves, who stood stone-faced in the corner of the room. "Zoe, this is very important. Did you feel anything strange when the Zarkonian was communicating?" Zoe furrowed her brow, thinking hard. It was weird. The sounds and colors. They kind of made pictures in my head. Not clear ones, but like feelings. I can't really explain it. Amelia's heart raced. This was it, the breakthrough they had been searching for. Somehow, this young girl had managed to establish a rudimentary form of communication with the aliens, something that had eluded the world's top scientists for over a year. "Colonel, we need to set up a controlled environment where Zoe can interact with the Zarkonians again," Amelia said, her mind already formulating plans. If she can communicate with them, even on a basic level, it could change everything. Reeves shook his head firmly. "Absolutely not. It's too dangerous. We have no idea what these creatures are capable of." "But they didn't hurt me," Zoe protested. "They seemed curious, like they wanted to understand us too." The debate raged on for days. Zoe's parents were understandably terrified at the idea of their daughter being used as a liaison with an alien species. The military was vehemently opposed to any civilian, let alone a child, being allowed near the Zarkonians. But Amelia was persistent, arguing that this might be their only chance to establish meaningful contact. Finally, a compromise was reached. A heavily guarded facility would be constructed near the perimeter of the New York enclave. Zoe would be allowed to interact with the Zarkonians under strict supervision, with layers of security measures in place to ensure her safety. As preparations were made, Zoe found herself at the center of a whirlwind of activity. She underwent crash courses in xenobiology, linguistics, and even basic diplomacy. Through it all, she remained excited and determined, driven by an innate curiosity that seemed to mirror that of the Zarkonians themselves. The day of the first official contact arrived. Zoe stood in the sterile white room, separated from a single Zarkonian by a transparent barrier. Her heart pounded as she raised her hand in the now familiar wave. The alien responded immediately, its scales flickering in a dazzling display of colors. Zoe concentrated, allowing her mind to open to the strange sensations that accompanied the Zarkonians' communication. Images and emotions flooded her consciousness. Curiosity, caution, a desire to understand. Zoe focused on projecting her own thoughts and feelings in return, imagining them as colors and sounds. In the observation room, Amelia and her team watched in awe as Zoe and the Zarkonian engaged in what could only be described as a conversation. It was unlike anything they had ever seen, a form of communication that transcended language and species barriers. Hours passed, and slowly, painfully slowly, understanding began to emerge. The Zarkonians, it seemed, were not invaders, but refugees. Their home world had been destroyed, and Earth was their last hope for survival. Their actions, which had seemed hostile and territorial, were born of fear and a desperate need for self-preservation. As the sun set on that momentous day, Zoe emerged from the facility exhausted but exhilarated. She had done what armies of scientists and diplomats had failed to do. She had built a bridge between two worlds. The news spread rapidly, igniting hope in a world that had teetered on the brink of despair. The Zarkonians, no longer seen as inscrutable monsters, began to be viewed in a new light. Humanity, faced with the knowledge that they were no longer alone in the universe, found itself reevaluating its place in the cosmos. Zoe Harper, the accidental ambassador, had set in motion a chain of events that would reshape the future of both species. But as night fell and she drifted off to sleep, dreaming of shimmering scales and alien worlds, she remained blissfully unaware of the challenges and dangers that still lay ahead. The journey towards true understanding and cooperation had only just begun, and the path forward was fraught with obstacles. Yet, in the heart of a young girl who dared to reach out across the stars, the seeds of a brighter future had been planted. Secrets of the Zarkonian Empire. As weeks turned into months, Zoe's unique ability to communicate with the Zarkonians became an invaluable asset in the growing interspecies dialogue. The young girl's natural empathy and openness allowed her to delve deeper into the alien psyche than any adult human had managed. Through their unconventional exchanges of colors, sounds, and telepathic impressions, a clearer picture of Zarkonian society began to emerge. Dr. Amelia Chen worked tirelessly alongside Zoe, meticulously documenting every interaction and slowly piecing together a lexicon of Zarkonian communication. It was painstaking work, but with each session, the fog of misunderstanding between the two species began to lift. One particularly momentous day, as Zoe sat cross-legged before the transparent barrier, facing her now familiar Zarkonian counterpart, whom she had dubbed Prism due to its particularly vibrant scale patterns, a breakthrough occurred. Prism's scales rippled in a complex sequence of colors, accompanied by a series of low thrums that Zoe felt more than heard. Images flooded her mind. Vast cities of crystalline spires, spacecraft that seemed to bend the fabric of space itself, and at the center of it all, a pulsating orb of energy that radiated power and knowledge. The Nexus, Zoe gasped, the alien word somehow forming on her lips. She turned to Amelia, her eyes wide with excitement. They're showing me their home world, or what's left of it. The Nexus, it's like their version of the internet, but so much more. It's alive. Amelia leaned forward, her pen poised over her notepad. Can you describe it in more detail, Zoe? The girl closed her eyes, concentrating on the stream of information flowing from Prism. It's a network that connects all Zarkonians, not just with information, but with consciousness. They can share memories. Zoe closed her eyes, concentrating on the stream of information flowing from Prism. It's a network that connects all Zarkonians, not just with information, but with consciousness. They can share memories, emotions, even dreams. It's how they've achieved such advanced technology. Their entire species thinks and innovates as one. Amelia's mind raced with the implications, and this nexus, it was destroyed along with their home world. Zoe nodded slowly, her expression darkening as she processed the emotions Prism was projecting. Not destroyed, corrupted. Something went wrong, like a virus but worse. It started twisting their shared consciousness, turning them against each other. That's why they fled. As the sessions continued, more details of the Zarkonian civilization came to light. They were a species that had evolved beyond the need for verbal language, relying instead on their advanced telepathic abilities and the nexus to communicate and preserve their history. Their society was built on a foundation of shared knowledge and collective decision-making, a stark contrast to the individualistic nature of human culture. The revelation of the nexus and its corruption shed new light on the Zarkonians' actions upon arriving on Earth. Their seemingly hostile behavior and self-imposed isolation were not acts of aggression, but desperate measures to protect themselves and humanity from the lingering effects of the corrupted nexus. As Zoe delved deeper into Zarkonian history, she began to piece together the events that led to their exodus. Centuries ago, at the height of their civilization, the Zarkonians had achieved what they believed to be the pinnacle of evolution, a perfect synthesis of organic life and technology through the Nexus. But their hubris had blinded them to the dangers of such intimate connection. It was like a dream turning into a nightmare, Zoe explained to the rapt audience of scientists and government officials. They thought they had created utopia, but instead, they opened the door to something dark. The corruption of the Nexus had begun slowly, almost imperceptibly. Negative emotions and thoughts, which had always existed but were usually balanced by positive ones, began to amplify and spread through the network. Paranoia, aggression, and fear infected the collective consciousness like a virus. By the time the Zarkonians realized what was happening, it was almost too late. In a desperate bid for survival, a faction of Zarkonians had managed to sever their connection to the Nexus and flee their dying world. But the journey had taken its toll. Cut off from the collective consciousness that had been the cornerstone of their existence, many Zarkonians struggled to function as individuals. The tension and fear that humans had perceived in them were as much a result of this trauma as it was a reaction to a new and potentially hostile world. As Zoe shared these revelations, the attitude towards the Zarkonians began to shift. Empathy replaced fear as humanity realized the true extent of the aliens' loss and suffering. However, this newfound understanding also brought with it a terrifying realization. The corruption that had destroyed the Zarkonian homeworld could potentially pose a threat to Earth as well. Amelia, working closely with a team of xenobiologists and computer scientists, began to theorize about the nature of the Nexus corruption. If it's some form of self-propagating code or energy pattern, there's a chance it could have followed the Zarkonians here, she explained during a high-level briefing. We need to understand it better to protect both our species. The Zarkonians, through their communications with Zoe, expressed a willingness to share their knowledge to help humanity prepare for this potential threat. However, they warned that direct exposure to their technology could be dangerous for humans, whose minds were not evolved to handle such intense telepathic connections. As the gravity of the situation became clear, world leaders convened an emergency summit to discuss the path forward. The debate was heated. Some argued for severing all ties with the Zarkonians to protect Earth from potential contamination, while others saw cooperation as the only way to face this new threat. In the midst of this global turmoil, Zoe found herself shouldering an immense responsibility. Her unique ability to communicate with the Zarkonians made her the linchpin in humanity's efforts to understand and prepare for the challenges ahead. The weight of this burden began to take its toll on the young girl, who struggled to balance her newfound role with the normal life she had once known. One night, as Zoe lay in bed, unable to sleep due to the swirling thoughts and alien memories that now occupied her mind, she made a decision. If humanity and the Zarkonians were to survive the coming storm, they would need to trust each other completely. And that trust would have to start with her. The next morning, Zoe approached Amelia with a daring proposal. I want to enter the Zarkonian enclave, she said, her voice steady despite the fear she felt. Not just communicate through barriers. I need to see their world, to understand them fully. It's the only way. Amelia's initial reaction was one of shock and refusal, but as Zoe explained her reasoning, the scientist began to see the logic in the girl's plan. If they could establish true, physical contact with the Zarkonians, it could accelerate their understanding and cooperation exponentially. As preparations for this unprecedented step began, tensions ran high. The world watched with bated breath as humanity prepared to take its first true step into an alien world. For Zoe, it was a journey into the unknown, filled with both terror and exhilaration. Little did anyone know that this brave act would set in motion a chain of events that would not only decide the fate of two species, but potentially reshape the very fabric of the universe itself. Part 4. The Human Resistance Rises. As news of Zoe's planned entry into the Zarkonian enclave spread, it ignited a firestorm of controversy across the globe. While many saw it as a necessary step towards cooperation and understanding, others viewed it as a reckless endangerment of a child and a potential threat to humanity's security. In the days leading up to the event, protests erupted in cities worldwide. Signs bearing slogans like "Protect Our Children" and "Humanity First" filled the streets, while counter-protesters argued for the importance of interspecies cooperation. The debate raged on news channels, social media, and in homes around the world. Amidst this chaos, a more sinister movement was taking root. A group calling themselves the Human Resistance Front, HRF, began to gain traction, spreading fear and xenophobic rhetoric. Led by the charismatic and ruthless former military officer, Colonel Victor Hawthorne, the HRF painted the Zarkonians as a threat that needed to be eliminated at all costs. Hawthorne's voice boomed through underground rallies and encrypted online forums. "We cannot trust these aliens," he thundered. "They destroyed their own world, and now they seek to do the same to ours. We must strike first, drive them from our planet before it's too late." As Zoe prepared for her historic journey into the Zarkonian enclave, security around her tightened. Dr. Amelia Chen, now serving as both a scientific advisor and a surrogate mother figure to the young girl, rarely left her side. Despite the growing tension, Zoe remained resolute in her decision. "I know people are scared," she confided in Amelia one evening. "But if they could feel what I feel when I communicate with Prism, they'd understand. The Zarkonians aren't our enemies. They're just lost, like we would be if we had to leave Earth behind." The day of Zoe's entry into the enclave dawned bright and clear. As she stood at the edge of the shimmering force field, dressed in a specially designed protective suit, the world held its breath. Cameras broadcasted the event live to billions of viewers around the globe. With a deep breath and a final wave to the anxious faces behind her, Zoe stepped through the barrier. For a moment, static filled the video feeds, and then wonder. The inside of the Zarkonian enclave was like nothing humanity had ever seen. Organic structures pulsed with bioluminescent light, while floating crystals hummed with energy. And there, waiting to greet her, stood Prism and a group of Zarkonian elders. As Zoe began to communicate with her alien hosts, the feed from her suit's cameras and sensors provided humanity with its first real glimpse into Zarkonian society. The beauty and alienness of it all was breathtaking. For a brief moment, it seemed as though a new era of understanding and cooperation was dawning. But the forces of fear and hatred were not idle. As the world watched Zoe's historic visit, the HRF was putting its own plans into motion. Hawthorne, having gathered a significant following and stockpiled weapons, saw the distraction of Zoe's visit as the perfect opportunity to strike. In a coordinated attack, HRF cells around the world launched assaults on the Zarkonian enclaves. Explosions rocked the force fields, while heavily armed militants attempted to breach the barriers. The sudden violence caught both humans and Zarkonians off guard. Inside the New York enclave, Zoe found herself caught in the middle of chaos. The Zarkonians, their telepathic senses overwhelmed by the sudden surge of fear and aggression, began to react instinctively. Their scales flashed in patterns of alarm, and energy crackled around them. "Stop," Zoe cried out, both verbally and mentally, trying to project calm to both sides. "Please, you don't understand. We don't have to fight." But her pleas were drowned out by the sound of gunfire and alien energy weapons. As the battle raged, Zoe and Prism found themselves separated from the others. In a moment of desperation, Prism made a decision that would change everything. Using its advanced technology, Prism created a small, localized version of the Nexus, a direct link between its mind and Zoe's. "You must understand," it communicated urgently. "Must see the truth." Before Zoe could protest, she felt her consciousness expand. Suddenly, she wasn't just seeing the Zarkonians' memories and emotions. She was experiencing them as if they were her own. The full history of their species, the beauty of their lost world, and the horror of its corruption flooded her mind. And there, hidden within the torrent of alien memories, Zoe glimpsed something that made her blood run cold. The corruption that had destroyed the Zarkonian homeworld hadn't been an accident. It had been a weapon. A weapon created by a force so ancient and terrible that the Zarkonians had fled across the galaxy to escape it. As Zoe's mind reeled from this revelation, the battle outside reached a fever pitch. The HRF, though outmatched by Zarkonian technology, was causing significant damage through sheer numbers and determination. The Zarkonians, their carefully maintained isolation shattered, were beginning to consider more drastic measures to defend themselves. In the command center outside the enclave, Amelia watched in horror as the situation spiraled out of control. "We need to get Zoe out of there," she urged the military personnel around her. "If either side decides to use more extreme measures, she'll be caught in the crossfire." But extracting Zoe proved easier said than done. The chaos of the battle made pinpointing her location difficult, and the fluctuating energy fields interfered with communication signals. As precious minutes ticked by, the fate of not just Zoe, but of human Zarkonian relations, and potentially the entire planet, hung in the balance. In the heart of the enclave, Zoe finally managed to break free from the flood of Zarkonian memories. With newfound determination, she grabbed Prism's hand. "We have to stop this," she said firmly. "And we have to warn everyone about what's coming. But first, we need to show them that we're not enemies." Together, the human girl and the alien moved towards the center of the conflict. As they approached the battle lines, Zoe took a deep breath and focused all her mental energy on projecting a single powerful message, a combination of human words and Zarkonian telepathic imagery that screamed out for peace. The effect was immediate and startling. Human and Zarkonian alike paused, momentarily stunned by the force of Zoe's mental broadcast. In that moment of silence, her voice rang out clear and strong. "Look at us," she cried, gesturing to herself and Prism. "Human and Zarkonian, standing together. We're not enemies. We're survivors, both of us. And if we don't learn to work together, we'll all be victims." As the dust settled and the fighting gradually ceased, Zoe's words hung in the air. The image of the young human girl standing hand in hand with a Zarkonian became a powerful symbol, broadcast around the world. It was a moment that would be remembered in history books for generations to come. The day when humanity and Zarkonians took their first true step towards mutual understanding. But even as a fragile peace began to form, Zoe knew that this was only the beginning. The truth she had glimpsed in the Zarkonian memories weighed heavily on her mind. A greater threat was looming on the horizon, one that would require both species to overcome their differences and unite as never before. As the sun set on that tumultuous day, Zoe looked out at the crowd of humans and Zarkonians, their faces a mix of hope and uncertainty. She squeezed Prism's hand, drawing strength from the alien's presence. Whatever challenges lay ahead, they would face them together. The real battle, the fight for the future of both their species, was just beginning. A new era of cooperation. In the weeks following the failed HRF attack, the world teetered on a knife's edge. The image of Zoe and Prism standing united against the violence had become a rallying cry for peace, but tensions remained high. Governments scrambled to contain the aftermath, while public opinion swayed back and forth like a pendulum between fear and hope. Zoe, now recognized globally as a symbol of human Zarkonian cooperation, found herself thrust into a role she had never imagined. With Amelia's guidance and Prism's constant support, she became a vocal advocate for interspecies understanding. Her unique ability to bridge the communication gap made her an invaluable asset in the delicate negotiations that followed. As the dust settled, a new initiative was born. The Interspecies Cooperative Alliance, ICA. This groundbreaking organization, composed of both human and Zarkonian representatives, was tasked with fostering collaboration and preparing both species for the greater threat that loomed on the horizon. The revelation of the true nature of the Nexus corruption sent shockwaves through the scientific community. Dr. Amelia Chen led a joint human Zarkonian research team in studying this ancient weapon, hoping to develop defenses against it. The work was painstaking and dangerous, as they sought to understand a technology that had nearly destroyed an entire civilization. Meanwhile, Colonel Hawthorne and the remnants of the HRF were branded as terrorists. Many of their members were arrested, but Hawthorne himself managed to evade capture. He disappeared underground, his xenophobic ideology festering in the shadows. As months passed, the Zarkonian enclaves slowly began to open up. Carefully controlled cultural exchange programs were established, allowing humans and Zarkonians to learn from each other directly. The process was not without its challenges. Millennia of evolution had created vast differences between the two species, but progress, though slow, was steady. Zoe, now 13, split her time between her studies, diplomatic duties, and her ongoing role as a bridge between the two species. The mental link she had formed with Prism during the attack had left her changed. She found herself more attuned to the Zarkonian way of thinking, able to grasp concepts that left other humans baffled. One sunny afternoon, as Zoe sat in a newly constructed human Zarkonian learning center, she felt a sudden chill. Images flashed through her mind. Stars going dark, worlds crumbling, a wave of nothingness sweeping across the galaxy. She gasped, nearly falling out of her chair. "It's coming," she whispered, her eyes wide with fear. "Sooner than we thought." The warning spread quickly through both human and Zarkonian channels. The threat they had been preparing for, the same force that had corrupted the Nexus and driven the Zarkonians from their homeworld, was approaching faster than anyone had anticipated. In the face of this existential threat, the last vestiges of mistrust between humans and Zarkonians melted away. The next few months saw an unprecedented surge of cooperation and technological advancement. Zarkonian biotech was merged with human ingenuity, creating hybrid technologies that pushed the boundaries of what both species thought possible. Space programs were revitalized and expanded. Massive defense platforms were constructed in orbit, while bunkers were built deep beneath the Earth's surface. The Zarkonians shared their faster-than-light travel technology, and space programs were revitalized and expanded. Massive defense platforms were constructed in orbit, while bunkers were built deep beneath the Earth's surface. The Zarkonians shared their faster-than-light travel technology, and soon, joint human-Zarkonian crews were venturing out into the solar system, establishing outposts and early warning systems. Amelia's research team made a breakthrough in understanding the nature of the Nexus corruption. They discovered that it was a form of self-replicating quantum code, capable of infecting both organic minds and advanced computer systems. Armed with this knowledge, they began developing countermeasures, though the work was far from complete. As the months flew by, Zoe found herself at the center of another groundbreaking project. Drawing on her unique connection to both human and Zarkonian thought patterns, she worked with a team of scientists and engineers to create a new form of interface, one that would allow humans to access a limited, safe version of the Zarkonian Nexus. "If we can link our minds, even partially," Zoe explained to a panel of world leaders, her voice steady despite her youth, "we'll be able to coordinate our defenses in ways we never could before. We'll think and react as one, just like the Zarkonians used to." The proposal was met with both excitement and trepidation. The potential benefits were enormous, but the risks were equally great. The memory of what had happened to the Zarkonian homeworld loomed large in everyone's minds. As debates raged and preparations continued, the first signs of the approaching threat began to appear. Long-range sensors detected anomalies at the edge of the solar system, spatial distortions that defied conventional physics. The clock was ticking, and humanity, and the Zarkonians found themselves in a race against time. In orbit above Earth, a joint fleet of human and Zarkonian ships assembled. On the ground, millions huddled in shelters, while brave volunteers manned the defense stations. And at the heart of it all, in a heavily fortified command center, stood Zoe, Prism, Amelia, and the leaders of both species. "It's time," Zoe said softly, her hand intertwined with Prism's. She looked around at the faces of those gathered, human and Zarkonian alike, all united in purpose. Whatever happens next, we face it together. With a deep breath, Zoe activated the prototype Nexus interface. Around the world, thousands of specially trained humans and Zarkonians did the same. For a moment, there was silence. Then, like a symphony coming into tune, minds began to connect. With a deep breath, Zoe activated the prototype Nexus interface. Around the world, thousands of specially trained humans and Zarkonians did the same. For a moment, there was silence. Then, like a symphony coming into tune, minds began to connect. The sensation was overwhelming at first, a cacophony of thoughts, emotions, and sensations flooding through the network. But Zoe, drawing on her years of experience communicating with the Zarkonians, guided the collective consciousness. Slowly, the chaos coalesced into harmony. Through the shared nexus, humanity experienced a profound shift in perspective. They saw the universe through Zarkonian eyes, felt the pain of losing a homeworld, and understood the true nature of the threat they faced. The Zarkonians, in turn, felt the indomitable human spirit, the fierce determination to survive against all odds. As the enemy approached, the combined fleet moved into position. Ships piloted by neural-linked crews performed maneuvers with unprecedented precision. On the ground, defense systems came online, their operators working in perfect synchronization. The battle that followed was unlike anything Earth had ever seen. The enemy, a swarm of semi-organic machines that pulsed with corrupted Nexus energy, descended upon the solar system. They'd moved with a singular purpose: to consume, corrupt, and expand. But the defenders were ready. Human ingenuity combined with Zarkonian technology to create a formidable defense. Quantum-entangled weapons disrupted the enemy's cohesion, while adaptive shields absorbed and redirected their attacks. At the heart of it all, Zoe and Prism stood as the linchpin of the entire operation. Their unique bond allowed them to interpret and redirect the flood of information coursing through the Nexus, coordinating the global defense with incredible efficiency. The battle raged for days, the fate of two civilizations hanging in the balance. There were losses, brave souls sacrificed in the defense of their homes. But for every ship lost, for every life extinguished, the resolve of the defenders only grew stronger. In the final hours of the conflict, Zoe made a startling discovery through the Nexus. The corruption at the heart of the enemy swarm wasn't just a weapon. It was a twisted form of life, seeking to propagate itself across the galaxy. And like all life, it could be reasoned with. In a daring move, Zoe and Prism projected their combined consciousness into the heart of the enemy swarm. What followed was a battle not of weapons, but of ideas. Human creativity and adaptability merged with Zarkonian wisdom and unity, creating a force of will that the corruption could not overcome. Slowly, painstakingly, they began to unravel the corruption, replacing its destructive impulses with something new. A drive to create rather than consume, to unite rather than divide. As the sun rose on the 8th day of battle, the enemy swarm began to dissipate. The corrupted machines, now free from their destructive programming, fell dormant. The threat that had driven the Zarkonians from their home and threatened to destroy Earth was finally neutralized. In the aftermath of the battle, as the world began to rebuild, a new age dawned. Humans and Zarkonians, their bond forged in the crucible of war, looked to the future with hope. The technologies developed for defense now promised to revolutionize every aspect of life, from medicine to space exploration. Zoe, hailed as a hero by both species, found herself at the forefront of this new era. As she stood with Prism, looking out at the horizon, where the first joint human-Zarkonian city was being constructed, she felt a sense of profound optimism. "We did it," she said softly, squeezing Prism's hand. "We faced our fears, overcame our differences, and saved not just ourselves, but maybe the whole galaxy." Prism's scales shimmered in agreement, its thoughts resonating through their shared link. "And this is just the beginning. It communicated, "Together, there's no limit to what we can achieve." As the sun set on this new world, Zoe knew that challenges still lay ahead, but she also knew that whatever the universe might throw at them, humanity and the Zarkonians would face it together. Two species, one shared destiny, united in their quest to explore, understand, and protect the cosmos. The brave little human girl who had dared to reach out across the stars had not only unveiled the secrets of the once hostile alien lizards, but had also paved the way for a future brighter than anyone could have imagined. In the annals of both human and Zarkonian history, this would be remembered as the moment when the true potential of cooperation and understanding was realized, opening up a new chapter in the story of life in the universe.